Hey guys, this is going to be a clarification video to the last video. I made a couple of semantical errors that I'd like to clarify now. I don't mind admitting when I've made mistakes. When I describe what these mistakes were to you though, you're going to think they were pretty insignificant, and they were. They don't affect the core arguments that I was making. They don't affect the validity of the criticism that I had of the various legislations that we've been talking about in these videos. But they were errors, and it gives me a chance to talk about a little bit more about the context of why I described Manning as upholding his oath to the Constitution when he leaked that information about the Iraq invasion. So when I was talking about that, I described the authorization for use of military force against Iraq as the AUMF 2002 draft, which, if you took that little phrase out of context of what I was talking about, you could spin it to make it sound like I was conflating the Iraq legislation with the AUMF, which later became the NDAA. But it was clear if you actually watched the video that section I was talking about the Iraq legislation, because I was talking about the context of how Congress was lied to in order to pass that legislation, the authorization for use of military force against Iraq. Okay, so not the AUMF draft, 2002 draft. You get that? Yep. I know most of you watching already understood that, the distinction there, but there it is. The other one that's slightly more of a significant error, relatively speaking, was that I said that when I'd said that Manning upheld his oath of protecting the Constitution, I said that was because the Constitution of America outlaws wars of aggression. Now, that isn't the correct way to describe the constitutional problems with the Iraq invasion. So I'm going to do that now. And the reason I described it as such is because I've seen it described as unconstitutional from many different sources, and this is why. And this is going to be, I'm going to read to you because it's going to describe exactly why in far better words than I could. We read an article by John Bonifaz. He's a constitutional lawyer, expert, and this is how he describes the unconstitutionality of the Iraq invasion. He says, while all of the Democratic presidential candidates except Lieberman criticised Bush for his unilateral recklessness in starting a war against Iraq, they are missing a larger point. The invasion was not just reckless, it was unconstitutional. It is time to set the record straight. The United States Congress never voted for the Iraq war. Rather, Congress voted for a resolution in October 2002, the legislation I was clearly talking about in that section of the video, which unlawfully transferred to the President the decision-making power of whether to launch a first-strike invasion of Iraq. The United States Constitution vests the awesome power of deciding whether to send a nation into war solely in the United States Congress. So the War Powers Act was a work around the Constitution. And I know that lots of wars have been started without the explicit signing off from the United States Congress. That doesn't affect the fact that the Congress initially, laid down that Congress should be the only body of power that can decide to bring America into war. Bonifaz goes on. Those members of Congress who signed the October 2002 resolution, including certain Democratic presidential candidates who voted for that October resolution, cannot now claim that they were deceived, as some of them do. By unlawfully ceding the war-declaring power to the President, they allowed the President to start a war against Iraq based on whatever evidence and whatever lies he chose. As we saw, that is exactly what happened. The members of Congress who voted for that October resolution are as complicit in this illegal war as is the President himself. Now, again, I'm not saying, I'm sure actually Rob and Skep will agree with me on this point, and that's the beauty of it. So in their next videos, they're going to make a huge stink about those semantical errors, whilst they actually agree with me on the validity or lack thereof of the Iraq invasion. Okay, and they'd probably go so far to agree that it was unconstitutional in that way. And the point I was making was that Bradley Manning swore an oath to the Constitution. So by exposing this unconstitutional, by exposing the horrors of this unconstitutional war, he was acting in a very patriotic way. Anyway, I'll go on from this. Thomas Jefferson I should say the War Powers Clause of the Constitution, saying that Congress is supposed to be the only body that decides America to go into war. The War Powers Clause of the Constitution emerged from that collective memory. Congress shall have power to declare war. No other language in the Constitution is as simple and clear. Thomas Jefferson called it an effectual check to the dog of war. George Mason said that he was for clogging rather than facilitating war. James Wilson stated, "This system will not hurry us into war. It is calculated to guard against it. It will not be in the power of a single man or a single body of men to involve us in such distress, for the important power of declaring war is vested in the legislature at large." Several years after the adoption of the Constitution, James Madison would write, "In no part of the Constitution is more wisdom to be found than in the clause which confides the question of war and peace to the legislature, and not to the executive department." So that is how the Iraq invasion was unconstitutional. That's the correct way to analyse the unconstitutionality of the Iraq invasion. So for me to say that the Constitution outlaws wars of aggression was incorrect, I'm sure most of you can agree. That's quite a insignificant distinction to make, although it's an interesting one to bring up because it allows me to go into more detail as to why I believe Bradley Manning was upholding his oath of protecting the Constitution and being extremely patriotic for exposing the truth of that illegal war. So that's those errors. Maybe they've got other things they can pick me up on. I don't really know. Again, my agenda is to try and have an accurate appraisal of the actions of our governments with a view to understanding whether or not you can support those actions. That's the core of all political discussion of any merit. So I'd be interested to see what other things they try and pick me up on. I'm sure it's all just as significant. Alright guys, bye bye.